Okay, we're going to get started. Greetings, everyone. My name is Adam Greco, and I am the founder of the SDEC here for Search Discovery, and I'll also be your presenter today. During the session, if you have any questions or can't hear, can't see, anything like that, try to hit me up in the chat, and I'll do my best to deal with that as I'm presenting. So for those of you who I haven't met, just a little background on me. I was one of the early employees at Omniture. I was in the consulting practice early on. I've been associated with Adobe Analytics implementation, so been a customer Adobe Analytics side, Mercantile Exchange and Salesforce.com. Wrote the book for Adobe on the Adobe Analytics product and have been blogging on the product for years. Today we're going to talk about merchandising eVars, which is one of my favorite topics because it's one of the most confusing when it comes to Adobe Analytics. For those of you who are new to the SDEC, this is a free community that we've set up to cover 12 specific topic areas related to digital experiences and analytics. If you're not joining sessions related to things outside of Adobe Analytics, there are a lot of other ones that you can join and you can get invites to these sessions. So totally free, no sales, just a way to kind of help people out there learn more about what's going on in the world. So far, the response has been amazing. We just broke our 2,300 mark, and we have over 1,800 people just who have subscribed to the Adobe Analytics topic. We're in 70 countries and closing in on 700 cities. I've been playing around with Google Maps to kind of show you where all the members are coming from. So in order to help us, to help you, one thing that's really helpful is if you can join the Slack group. Right now, we've got about 70% of the people in the Slack group. Email is getting tricky with this many people. So if you can join the Slack group, that really helps us out. And if you do join the Slack group, if you could make your full name a display name, your first name and last name, that helps because there's a lot of people that have the same name. Also, if you could make sure to put SDEC at Search Discovery in your list of contacts. We find a lot of people are not getting our emails, so that would really be helpful. Make sure you're getting all the calendar invites. And if your organization doesn't let you use Zoom, that's okay. If you DM me, Adam Greco, I can figure out a different way for you to see the webinars live. We have a way to do that through YouTube. And if you're getting too many meeting invites and you just don't want it anymore, just DM me and I can remove you from the email list. If you can help us get new members, that's awesome because it really helps us to get better speakers. Once we hit 3,000, 4,000 members, we'll be able to get people like Avinash Kaushik and others to maybe come here and speak. So there's a link that I've got here that if you want to invite friends, colleagues, you can do that. And I'll also put it in the chat for everyone as well. But we're also looking to kind of see where people are finding about this from. So we've got a little form and a place where people can tell us. And so far, we're doing a little contest to see who can get the most people to join. So far, the winner is Craig Scribner. And we're going to let it go for another couple weeks, and then we'll figure out some sort of cool prize for whoever refers the most people. In terms of upcoming sessions, we have 25 SDEC sessions that are planned between now and February. So we have tons of sessions out there across all range of topics. Since this is an Adobe session, the ones that I highlighted, I'm going to be covering the advanced parts of merchandising next month. And then the month after that, I'm going to dive into Saint classifications. But we do have a lot of other ones, and I just wanted to show you some of the ones that are coming up in the near term. Now, one special request I have here today, since I've gotten an Adobe audience, I am looking for some volunteers for a project that I'm working on. I've been working for a year on making a new product called Apollo that helps Adobe Analytics customers. And we're getting ready to move into beta, and I'm looking for some volunteers. So if you are someone who loves Adobe Analytics and wants to kind of get an advanced preview of a cool new product that helps with Adobe Analytics implementations, I would love to talk to you and give you a personal demo of what we're building to kind of get feedback. No pressure, no sales, just looking for people who are passionate about Adobe Analytics to give us really good feedback about what we're building and new features they might want. So I've got a link here that you can go to that just takes you to a quick form, or you can point your camera at that and use the QR code. So I'll put that in the chat as well, but it'd be awesome if we could just get even just a couple of you, because we're really loving the feedback we're getting so far, but we want to kind of get more people out there. Okay, last thing before we dive in, if you have questions during this session, please don't put them in the chat because that doesn't help us. Put them in the Q&A area. In Zoom, at the bottom of your menu, there should be a Q&A that you can click and put your question there, because all of those questions I will be able to answer after I'm done, and I can answer them in a written format. Unfortunately, if they're in the chat area, we lose that. So that's it. Let's move on to the main event. Adobe Analytics Merchandising eVars. Now, this topic is so large that I actually had to split it up into 2 sessions. I originally was going to cover it in one, but I just couldn't do it justice. So I'm going to cover the beginning here, and then we'll get into some of the more advanced stuff next time. So most people tend to be afraid of merchandising eVars. I've heard this over the last 10, 15 years because basically they're pretty complicated and they're a little confusing. So a lot of people just avoid them altogether, which is a shame because merchandising is one of the coolest features of Adobe Analytics. And it's actually one of the features that really differentiates Adobe Analytics from some other analytics tools. So my hope is that I'm going to try to give it to you in an easy to understand way so that you can walk away and think about ways you could use it at your organization. So at a super high level, let's start with, merchandising eVars are eVars, and they're conversion variables like any other eVar. So just to kind of revisit the way eVars work, eVars are used to break down metrics, normally your custom success events or things like orders and revenue, down into buckets. So here, from our last dimension session, here's just an example of orders, revenue, AOV, broken down by an eVar. In this case, the eVar happens to be tracking code. So merchandising eVars act just like any other eVar in their purpose, which is to be able to allow you to break down metrics into buckets. And as we talked about in a past session, eVars have some common attributes. They are persistent, which means that you can have the values persist as long as you want them to, whether that's a hit, a visit, an hour, until the success event occurs. And they also have attribution in terms of, do you want it to be first touch, last touch, or linear. So there's lots of different settings that you can set for any eVar, and merchandising eVars follow the same thing. But here's where merchandising eVars get a little divergent from regular eVars. Let's imagine a situation where you have a traditional eVar. So you're just passing something like internal search term into an eVar. And your goal in this case is to see, I want to see which internal search terms are leading to revenue. So let's walk through a scenario where we're capturing internal search term in an eVar and we're using a traditional eVar. So a visitor comes to the website and they put in the search phrase Harry Potter. That is stored in an eVar. And let's assume that that eVar is just a most recent, it's a last touch eVar. Then that same visitor, a page or two later, finds a Harry Potter book and adds it to the cart. And that book is $20. Then the visitor, maybe a couple pages later, searches for Xbox. So that value is now the latest value stored in the eVar. Then a couple pages later, they find an Xbox console and they add it to the cart. And let's say that Xbox console is worth $200. So then they click and click and click. And now the visitor checks out and they decide to purchase both products. They bought the Harry Potter book and the Xbox console. And that total order was $220. So if this is a regular eVar, just to kind of test everyone here and see how we're all following along, I'm going to launch a quick little poll here. And I want you to tell me which eVar value will get credit for this order and how much money. So I'm going to post that. So go ahead, and it's anonymous, so your name's not associated with it. So tell me all what you think, which eVar is going to get credit for the revenue. And I've got a couple polls here today, so we're gonna make this as interactive as possible. So I'm gonna give you another 30 seconds, so crank away. Let me know what you think. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2. Oh, they're still coming in. I'll give you a couple more seconds. Okay, so let's look at the results. So you all believed that the search term Xbox was going to get credit for $220 in revenue. So about 73% of you said that. About 20% said that the search term Harry Potter would get 20 and Xbox would get 200. And then a couple of you thought that Harry Potter would get it. So let's see what happens here. So the correct answer is that since it was a last touch eVar, the majority of you were correct that Xbox would actually get credit for all $220. Now, if it would have been a first touch eVar, then some of you who mentioned Harry Potter, that would have been correct if it was a first touch eVar. Now, if someone would have done linear, it would have been completely wrong because it would have split 110 and 110. Now, if you're using some of the more advanced models that Adobe has, you might use like a J-curve or an inverse J-curve, and it would do some sort of an attribution depending on how many search terms. In this case, since there are only 2, it might give a little bit to Harry Potter and then most of it to Xbox and so on. So the truth here is that it really varies based on what settings you use and what attribution you use. But what's interesting is that the correct answer, which some of you put in there, but it's actually not the correct answer that Adobe would give, is that what you really wanted is you wanted Harry Potter to give $20 credit, or get $20 credit, and Xbox to get 200. Now, ironically, J-curve might have been somewhat close to that, but that's actually just more of a coincidence. If you would have searched for 5 search terms, that would have not been the case. And J-curve doesn't work out of the box. So that's basically why regular eVars have a problem. Your data would be incorrect if you're using an internal search term with last touch, because it would always give credit to the last term for all of the products that are purchased. And that's definitely not what we want. So that's what led Adobe back in the day, Omniture, to build merchandising eVars. So how do we get in that situation Harry Potter to get $20 credit and Xbox to get $200 credit? Well, that's why we need to use merchandising eVars. So what a merchandising eVar does is it assigns a different eVar value to each product so that each product can have a different value when a subsequent or later success event occurs. In many cases, that is the purchase. So instead of an eVar having just one value like a regular eVar, what I want you to remember is that merchandising eVars subdivide themselves by product. So if you were to look at the cookie behind the scenes, if it was a merchandising eVar, the Harry Potter book might have a product ID of 11234 in the products variable, and that product value would be bound with the eVar value Harry Potter. But the Xbox product would be bound with the phrase Xbox. And so what we're doing is we're letting each product have its own eVar value. So that's what's really cool about merchandising eVars. Now, the way this works is that when a purchase occurs, Adobe Analytics will look to see which products were actually purchased. And it knows that because when a purchase happens, you have to pass which products are being purchased to the product string. So if it sees that there's any products that are purchased and those products match one that has a merchandising eVar value, then it will assign the credit. So for example, here, if this person that we talked about purchased 11234 and 17231, then that the purchase string, the product string already knows that that product is $20 and this product is $200. So it will basically use merchandising to figure out how to give the correct credit. So that's the key difference. And we're going to go into a lot more detail of how this works behind the scenes. But at the highest level, I want you to remember that merchandising eVars give different products different eVar values. And that's why using a regular eVar doesn't work when you have certain situations like this. But with Adobe Analytics, there's always more. It gets a little more complex. So let's look at how this works behind the scenes. There are actually two different types of merchandising eVars. That's where I lose most people when I talk about merchandising. The easiest one to understand is what I call product syntax merchandising eVars. Now, product syntax merchandising eVars are ones that you set manually, and it's ones where you know what eVar value you want to bind to each product. So this is done in the product string, and this is basically used in all cases where you know the specific eVar value you want to put with the specific product ID. So for example, if you go to, say, a product detail page, and you know that this is product 111, if you want to track a SKU for that product and you know the SKU right then on that page, then you would probably make product SKU a product syntax merchandising eVar. Likewise, if you knew, say, the size of the product they were looking at, medium or large, or if you knew that there were 50 available, or you knew the rating, or if you knew the brand associated with it, all of these things are things that as someone is opening up a page, there is something being passed to the products variable, and there's a high likelihood that you might know what is the exact product eVar that you want to put with that, whether it's the SKU or the size. And down below, I'm showing the shipping method where you could see that I've set the shipping method up as a product syntax merchandising eVar. And that's a good example, and that's one that I use a lot to kind of keep merchandising straight in my head. Because if you imagine that if someone is purchasing two products on your website, they might want to use a shipping method of, next day air for one product, and then another one could be, I don't care when I get it. And so in that case, if you were to use a regular eVar for shipping method, you'd be in trouble because it would apply to both products. But now, because you're using a product syntax merchandising eVar, you can have product A with next day air and product B could be something else. So anytime you know the mixture of the eVar value in the product, that's when you want to use the product syntax. And here's how it actually looks. So you would basically do it in the product string. And just as a refresher, we covered this in the past with the dimension session, but this is kind of the syntax where you've got the category, the product, quantity, the total price, any success events you want to set. And then the last slot in the product string is devoted for product syntax merchandising eVars. And you could do more than one and pipe delimit it. So a common example might be that I'm setting the purchase event and someone is buying product 11234, one unit for $20. But in this case, I want to set that the shipping method in eVar 30 is going to be standard. And then maybe the second product, I want to set that it's going to be overnight. And so this is how Adobe Analytics will bind this eVar value to 11234, and it will bind overnight shipping to 17231. So hopefully that makes sense and how the product syntax works. Now, the harder one is conversion syntax merchandising. This is the one that really throws people off, and we're going to spend a lot more time on this one in the advanced session. But at a high level, what I want you to understand about conversion syntax is that this is the type of merchandising you use when you don't know ahead of time what the binding should be with the product and the eVar. So for example, when we did the internal search term example earlier, when someone searched for Harry Potter, I had no idea if they were ever going to find a product, and that could have been 3 pages later. So there was no way that I could be, I don't have ESP to figure out when they're searching for Harry Potter, what I should set in the products variable. So it's impossible in that situation to use product syntax merchandising because I just don't know the product. Now, I could retain the search term in a cookie, and then later when they find the product, I could do that with product syntax. But the idea of conversion syntax is that you are asking Adobe to remember the value that you're passing into the eVar for many pages, and that persists as long as you set it in the admin console. And then when the person finds a product, that's when you are asking Adobe to do you a favor and bind the product that they ultimately found with the eVar value that has been stored in the conversion syntax merchandising eVar. And I know that sounds really confusing, but let's go through a couple examples. Product finding method is a common merchandising eVar that people do through conversion syntax. So let's say that you want to know how did people find products, and maybe they could find it through the top navigation, maybe they could find it through search, maybe they could find it through a wish list. Well, if they do a search on your website, then you would set the product finding method to on-site search. If they clicked on maybe a promo on the homepage, then you might say, okay, when they click on the homepage promo, I'm going to set the product finding method to homepage promotion. Now, at that point, the eVar has a value, but it doesn't know what to merchandise itself with. So then let's say 3 clicks later, someone finds a product, then at that point, Adobe would say, okay, well, the current finding method I have in my eVar is homepage promotion. They just found a product. So now I'm going to assume that the product they found, the finding method is homepage promo. And the same thing works for any other things. It could be an internal campaign code. Maybe you want to see which top nav links on your website are ultimately leading people to get orders and revenue. And so the whole point of conversion syntax is that you're always setting the eVars with the values, and then you're hoping that at some point they find a product, and then you're letting Adobe do the heavy lifting of binding them. So the next kind of logical question is, well, how does this work? How does Adobe know when it should bind? Well, in the admin console, if you select merchandising for an eVar, and if you change it to be a conversion syntax merchandising, there's a new little area that shows up here that's called merchandising binding event. And this is where you can choose the specific success events that you want to tell Adobe that says, if you see these events happen and they have something in the products variable, then I want you to basically bind. So if the conversion syntax merchandising eVar has a value and the products variable is being set at some page down the road, and one of these events that are highlighted takes place, that's when I want you to tell Adobe that this product should have this value that has been persisting in the conversion syntax merchandising eVar. However, in order for conversion syntax to work, a couple things have to happen. First of all, the conversion syntax merchandising eVar has to have a value, either set on that page or previously, and a product has to be passed to the products variable, and one of the selected binding events has to take place. So there's a lot of different things that are being juggled there, but once you learn it, it kind of becomes second nature. So you do have to go to the admin console and set a couple of these things up. Now, usually the next question I get from people is, well, how do I know which of these events in my implementation I should check off to become conversion syntax merchandising binding events? And that's a good question. There's not a right or wrong answer, but what I generally advise people is to think about what events on your site indicate that someone has officially found a product that they are interested in. So common culprits and common ones that you'll see are the product view event. Obviously, if they go to a product detail page, then they're probably interested in that product. So if you're looking at, say, internal search term as a conversion syntax like I'm showing here, if they searched on Harry Potter and then clicked and clicked and clicked, but then got to a product detail page for a product, then that might be when you want to bind and say, okay, well, the first product they got to when they searched for Harry Potter was this one, so that's the one I'm going to bind. Another common one might be cart addition. Maybe they can add to the cart without even going to the product detail page, just from a listing view. So maybe you want to bind to the cart addition. Another might be if you have a wish list on your site. Maybe if they have a product that they've added to the wish list, that might be a case where you know that they found one product and you want to bind that to whatever search term or whatever conversion syntax eVar was used. Maybe they share a product with a friend, or they do product comparisons. Anytime someone does something where you think they have narrowed down from many products down to one product, then I would probably make that your merchandising binding event in the admin console. And you could always change these at any point in time, but that's just kind of my advice. Now, a couple of weird little things that I'll just let you know. If you blow it and you forget to actually assign any of the merchandising binding events, Adobe will default to all. And I do not recommend that, because that basically means that it's going to bind when any of your success events take place. And that can really lead to some unpredictability in your data. And it means that the attribution of your conversion syntax merchandise eVar may not be right. There's a long kind of topic of why that would be wrong, but more than we can cover today. And the other thing is, in addition to success events, I've really never seen people do this, but I guess hypothetically you can. There is a way that you can actually bind on eVars, so that when an instance of an eVar takes place, you can bind then. I can, for the life of me, can't think of why you'd ever want to do that, because the odds are you probably have a success event before you would do that. So anyway, that's just some other random kind of things to know about conversion syntax. So now we're going to dial it to 11 and show how kind of crazy conversion syntax merchandising eVars can be, and why most people kind of get them wrong and are afraid of them. So let's kind of crank it up to 11 and look at an example here. Now, using conversion syntax merchandising eVars, I want you to imagine, similar to what we had before, we have an internal search term eVar, and we're making it conversion syntax. In the admin console, we have set that merchandising eVar to be an original value, first touch eVar. Now, I'm going to give you a little quiz here. Here's the scenario. We have product A, product B. The visitor searches for Harry Potter. Then they search for phone. Then they add product A to the cart, and the cart add is a valid binding event. Then they search for Xbox. Then they search for PlayStation. Then they add product B to the cart, and again, cart add is a binding event. Now, which eVar value do you believe would be bound to product A and product B? So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. Start chiming in your answers there. Okay, we're getting a good mix. I'll give you an extra couple seconds because this is a lot to take in. Okay, about 5 more seconds. Keep in mind, all these polls are anonymous, so you're not going to embarrass yourself in any way. Okay, so let's see what the results are. So we had a little bit of a split. About half of you thought it was going to be product A would be Harry Potter and B would be Xbox. And then we had about 30% thought that it was going to be iPhone and PlayStation. And then about 15% Harry Potter and Harry Potter. So let's see what the results are. So in this case, the correct answer is that it would be iPhone and PlayStation. And let's see, we got nobody with that answer. Oh no, I'm sorry, we got 28%. So 28% of you got it correct, that it was iPhone and PlayStation. And this kind of illustrates the point with the confusion of conversion syntax. You can see that 50% of you got this one wrong, but I understand why you got it wrong, because it kind of makes sense when you think about why it would be a first touch. And we're going to kind of go through a couple of these, and then we'll kind of sum it up at the end here. So without telling you why you got it wrong yet, we're going to go through one more example here. Same example, but now we're going to going to twist it up a little bit. So we're still going to use an original value first allocation, but in this case, someone searches for Harry Potter, then they search for iPhone, then they add product A to the cart. Then they search for Xbox and PlayStation, and then add B to the cart. And now they search for Atari and add product B to the cart. So very similar situation. And now I'm going to launch the poll, and I want you to think about what the right answer was last time. And now I want you to tell me what you think the right answer is in this poll. And I promise you at the end, I'm going to kind of explain all of this. But sometimes I find stumbling along the way and learning on your own sticks a little better. Okay, vote as quickly as you can so we can have as much time for Q&A. Okay, another 5 seconds. Okay, so let's look at the results. So we had 41% had said that they thought it was going to be iPhone and PlayStation, and we had 40% who thought it was going to be iPhone and Atari. Those were the two biggest ones. And let's see what the answer is. The answer is iPhone and PlayStation, which should sound a little bit familiar based on the last one we did. So in this case, we've got 41% of you got it right. And then the last one we're going to go through, and then I promise I'll explain all of this, is now we're going to do the same exact situation, but now we are going to do last touch. So in this case, it's going to be someone searches for Harry Potter, then they search for iPhone, and then they do product A, add that to cart. Then they search for Xbox, then they search for PlayStation, then they add product B, then they search for Atari, and then they add product B to the cart again, and then they do a cart add. So now I want you to tell me what is going to be the answer for product A and product B. Which eVar value would be bound for product A and product B? And I could already see here by your responses that my crazy system of forcing you to get the answers wrong is starting to pay off here. So let's take a look at the results here. So the results here came back that pretty much everyone, most of you had said that you felt like it was going to be iPhone and Atari. And you were correct. So this is the easiest one to remember, is that it's last and last. So I know I apologize for kind of putting you through that because it's a little painful and no one likes to get things wrong, but at least half of you in most of the cases got things right. So why do I torture you like this? Well, I want to kind of explain why this works the way it is. A lot of people don't understand that conversion syntax merchandising eVars only bind when the products variable is set and a binding event occurs at the same time. So the reason why in the original value, even though it common sense says to yourself that Harry Potter should be the original value, because the products variable wasn't set when someone searched for Harry Potter, it's almost like that gets ignored. But when they searched for iPhone, that was actually the original value that Adobe saw at the time when product A was added to the cart. So it's because the binding doesn't take place. It's almost like Harry Potter gets ignored. And that's why iPhone was the first value, the original value for product A. Now, when they searched for Xbox and PlayStation, and then they bind at product B, again, Xbox is ignored because it's not the value that was present when product B bound to the cart, which I know is completely confusing, but that's just the way it works. Now, when you go to the most recent, in this case, iPhone was the most recent value in the eVar when the binding took place. And so in that case, it doesn't even make difference if you're using Harry Potter or if you're using original or most recent. It doesn't matter because both most recent and original are going to be iPhone. But where the most recent and original does kick in is when you have product B if it's passed twice. So in the original model, the answer would be PlayStation because that was the original value that product B got during a binding event. But because product B got a second value, it got both PlayStation and Atari. Then and only then does conversion syntax merchandising eVar look to the first touch, last touch. So while you've been brought up in the Adobe world thinking first touch and last touch is persistent throughout the whole visit or whatever, it's really tied to the product when it comes to conversion syntax. And that's why Atari, for the most recent, is product B, because it's the Adobe Analytics saw two different product Bs bound. And at that point, it says, okay, I don't know what to do because I got PlayStation and Atari. And then it looks to the original or most recent. And if it sees original, it says, oh, if I get product B twice, I'm going to use the first one that I got. And in the most recent, I'm going to use the last one that I got. So again, I know it's super confusing. The good news is this is recorded, so you could always watch it again. But that's why merchandising eVars are hard. And that's why especially conversion syntax merchandising eVars are hard. But hopefully these examples kind of taught you a little bit. And the summary that I'll give you here is that because merchandising eVars only bind when the product's variable is set, because of this scenario, most people generally recommend that if you're using conversion syntax merchandising eVars, even though it seems counterintuitive, you actually want to use original value most of the time because it's always going to be the original value at the time of the first binding event, and that's usually what you want. It also means that if the same product is bound multiple times, the first value is going to be the one that gets the credit if you use original value. But keep in mind, it does not mean that all products are going to be assigned to the first eVar value passed to the conversion syntax merchandising eVar. It's only going to be the first value that's bound to each product. So even though you might be nervous about using original, saying that, for example, Harry Potter would be associated with everything, it's actually going to be whatever is the internal search term for each product. So if they keep searching for different search terms, different products will get different ones, even though it seems weird that you're using the original value. So that is it. So again, I know this is a confusing topic, but that's why I wanted to devote 2 sessions to it. So I'm going to use the remaining time that we have to kind of crank through as many questions that I can. So one of the questions here regarding conversion syntax merchandising, is it a bad practice to select all events and then rely on the presence of best products? So I believe that is a bad practice. Because I like to make sure that we're only telling Adobe to bind on the correct event, because there may be some random event that could throw things off. And as we just saw with conversion syntax, what just happened is we want to be really prescriptive because we could have automatically used the wrong search term if there was different binding events that happen. So I definitely recommend staying away from using all binding, all events. Next question, how does expiration of the eVar affect binding? Good question. So that is just like any other eVar. Expiration doesn't really change for merchandising eVars. What it would do is if the eVar expired before a binding event, then it would go to the unspecified, or it would expire and then another value that would go in would take its place. So expiration would be interesting if you're using original value, because you would want to make sure that you have the original value of the value you want. And then if you say after maybe 10 pages, you say, you know what, at that point, that's not any binding shouldn't be related to that. You could expire it, and then if they search again, then that would replace the original value. So there could be a really cool use of expiration when you're using original allocation. So that's actually a positive thing, but in general, expiration is going to work just like it does for anything else. Someone had said, can we use eVars as S props? I'm not sure. I apologize. I'm not sure I understand that question, so I'm going to skip that one. Are you sure the original value conversion syntax oddity isn't a bug that's become a feature? Nope, it actually is there for a reason, because there were a lot of retailers that wanted to be able to say, I want to know which eVar value gets credit for this product, and then later have other products and have them be very different. So it actually is there for a reason. It's just a little bit of a confusing reason. Someone had mentioned here, okay, I'm gonna skip that one. Um, I've heard that eVars should be cleared when using conversion syntax. So I don't generally clear them out. I mean, I would probably expire them just like I would expire any other eVar, maybe either at the visit or the purchase. But I haven't heard of a reason to clear out those eVars. So if you have information on that, you can feel free to email me, and I can see if I can do some research on that and elaborate on that. Next one, can the merchandising binding events be changed if needed, and would it have any adverse effects on the data? Good question. It's been a while, and I can check this. I'll check this in the written answers. I am pretty sure that if you change it, then it changes it going forward, but it will not change for any of your past customers who currently have something that is in the eVar and hasn't expired. So I believe that's the case. Now, there is also a way that you can actually kind of clear out the cookies for people in the admin console, but I believe that it is going forward, but I will see if I can double check the documentation on that. The next question I've got here, in most recent, the values are overwriting by merch eVar. How can we avoid this? So there's really not a way that you can avoid it, but keep in mind that with any eVar, it's going to always replace the values if you're using most recent. But if you're using a merchandising eVar, keep in mind that it's not going to actually overwrite unless the same product is used twice. So that means that, and that's pretty rare that someone is going to do something with the same product like more than once. So it's actually not as big of a deal with merchandising eVars as it is with regular eVars. But if there's more kind of detailed questions that you've got, let me know. Another question, in conversion syntax, if a user searches for Harry Potter and after 4 pages selected Xbox product and added it to cart, then will allocation be wrong? As against Harry Potter, will the product be Xbox? So yeah, so if someone searches for Harry Potter and then they click and click and click, and then they add a product of Xbox, there is nothing stopping Adobe Analytics for incorrectly giving credit to the Xbox product for the phrase Harry Potter. I mean, maybe one day Adobe Sensei will be smart enough to be able to kind of figure that out. But no, in that case, Harry Potter would get credit for the Xbox. And that may be a reason to Mark's earlier question why you might want to expire the eVar after maybe a couple page views, because you're like, okay, after a couple page views, maybe, it's not relevant. But your hope is that if they search for something, then they find a product. But that's kind of the risk you take with any eVar. And if that happens enough, then you might wonder, why are people searching for Harry Potter all the time and then selecting Xbox? But at least you see that they are doing a search. But yeah, there's not much that we can do about that. Okay, another question, and some of these are a little tricky to do on the fly, is binding event exist for multiple sessions? So the eVar will persist for multiple sessions, but the binding event is only what happens, it's always there. So whenever if that event happens and the eVar has a value and the product's variable is being set, it's going to set the value. Let me do one let me do one more here because I think we're running out of time. And I'll answer as many of these as I can in person. And I also might save some of these questions for some of these are a little more on the advanced. Um, Someone has said, is there any smart way to display a merchandising eVar like a list prop? No, and unfortunately, there is no way to do multiple values like a list var with merchandising. So list vars can't have merchandising, unfortunately. Someone had said, is it necessary to set the dummy product in the products variable when setting the merchandising eVar? So there is a case to be made for setting a dummy product, and I am going to cover that in the advanced session. So I'll come back to that one. Last one, with product view as the success event, if I search for Harry Potter and then I view product A and then I go back and search to search results and view product B, would the search term Harry Potter bind to both? I believe it would, because the eVar would still be persisting. It would still have the value Harry Potter, and both would meet the criteria of having a binding event. But because they're different products, both products would both be associated with the search phrase Harry Potter. So anyway, I know we have a lot more questions. I will answer as many as I can in written format. I'll keep this session open for another minute or so if you want to post more questions. But I hope this session was helpful for you to just at least have a primer for merchandising. And feel free to review the recording and check it out and if you want to pause. And if you have more detailed questions, next month, I'm going to be covering this in greater detail. So hopefully this was helpful for some of you new to merchandising. And for the rest of you, hopefully it was a good refresher. So thank you again, and we will talk soon.